Television experimentation was also expanding at a rapid pace in France, as well as in Germany and the Soviet Union. John Logie Baird, undaunted by the relatively crude images his system was still producing, began a long and often bitter campaign to get the BBC to transmit his mechanical system. He continued to ignore the increasingly high quality of the pictures being produced by experimenters in electronic television. Baird's chief electronic rival in Britain was EMI, which was affiliated with America's RCA. At its laboratory in Middlesex, EMI also had the services of an emigre Russian. Isaac Schoenberg was having success equal to that of his former colleague, Vladimir Zworykin. One of EMI's engineers, Bernard Greenhead, remembered an early demonstration.
Everybody seemed to be particularly pleased, and I think we were very pleased ourselves that there hadn't been any breakdowns. The equipment hadn't coughed at any time. And after the visitors had gone, Schoenberg came back into the control room and he said, "Well, gentlemen, you seemed to have perfected the biggest time waster of all mankind. I hope you use it well."
By this time, it was clear to most American entrepreneurs that mechanical television was a failure. The Depression and the conflict among the different systems being experimented with in this country drove people like Charles Francis Jenkins out of business. Only companies like RCA, with the huge profits generated by radio sales and its network, NBC, could afford to continue research. Zworykin had told David Sarnoff it would cost $100,000 to perfect his electronic television system. Sarnoff wound up spending $50 million. Work continued in other countries, including Zworykin's homeland, the Soviet Union.
When everything was ready, you heard, "Attention, attention, attention, comrades, radio viewers." Note that. Radio viewers. Watch. Listen to the first television concert.
And the radio viewers didn't have such a set. They didn't know what was going on. They tried to see something. They looked into the loudspeaker, and of course, they could see nothing. And our magazine received a flood of letters. Tell us where we should look.
In America, experimental broadcasts were taking place from a lab established for Philo Farnsworth by the Philco Corporation. Progress in the United States was slowed, partly by high costs and arguments over a universal standard for TV. There were several electronic systems, none of them compatible with any other. Farnsworth's patent battle with RCA and Sarnoff continued as well. Farnsworth was upheld by the courts. RCA was forced to negotiate a licensing agreement. When the deal was signed, RCA's representative allegedly had tears in his eyes. Both Sarnoff and Farnsworth continued to make prophetic statements. Showmanship in presenting political appeal will be more effective than mere skill in talking, Sarnoff predicted. Advertisers will be given new possibilities. And a newsreel announcer declared,
"Technicians in the Farnsworth Philadelphia laboratories have helped to make television the dazzling dream of the decade, a practical reality today."
Farnsworth and Sarnoff urged the speedy introduction of television on a commercial basis. Competitors balked. Why hurry when the picture still needed work and radio was so profitable? But RCA was determined to win the race for television.
We didn't want anybody to know how well we were doing. It was sort of like a spy. Anybody would give it away, the British would know and would beat us. So that was the whole purpose of that early secrecy, just to make sure that we were first.
Various delays were to cost RCA the worldwide race. In Britain, from August 1932, John Logie Baird had started an experimental service transmitted by the BBC. But as in America, the BBC was uneasy with Baird's crude mechanical pictures. If television remained a problem for the engineers, it was also a trial for the artists appearing on it. TV stars of the mechanical television studios often had to work in total darkness and very restricted spaces, scanned by a hot and brilliant beam of light. For those involved in either the mechanical or electronic experiments, makeup was a particular nightmare. Bizarre color combinations designed to bring out some semblance of a person's features. Performers needed a healthy sense of humor to look in the mirror.
We had makeup on me, put makeup on me with black lipstick. I looked like Pola Negri or Garbo years ago in silent pictures.
By 1934, Baird's commercial backers insisted that he take notice of the rapid developments in the rival electronic television. Baird's sponsors paid for $50,000 worth of electronic components from Philo Farnsworth to give a boost to the mechanical system. Farnsworth crossed the ocean and gave Baird a demonstration.
Mr. Baird was extolling his method of television, and he thought that it was better than Phil's and all this. And he got to the door of this room, and he got sight of the screen, and he became still. He carefully and slowly advanced to it like one mesmerized until he stood right in front of it and stood there for quite some minutes. And then he just turned and left without a word. And Phil felt very badly for him because he knew that he was hearing the death knell of his pet method of television.
Germany was also a leading contender in the TV race, opening a regular television service in 1935. Surprisingly, the Nazis did not directly exploit television's propaganda potential. Hitler never spoke on TV, and the service mainly transmitted novelty shows to a tiny handful of public sets in Berlin.
What the British were intending to do at the end of 35, we could do very well beforehand, that very day even. And so on March 22nd, 1935, from one day to the next, the first TV service in the world had begun.
It's still debatable whether this system won the race for TV. For one thing, the 180-line pictures were much cruder than the images superimposed in these German-made newsreels. The BBC began its regular service the next year with a picture that consisted of a high-definition 405 lines. But certainly, broadcasting from a studio in the Berlin post office, Ursula Patschka became one of the world's first television announcers.
I had a dog who always went with me. Time would drag, but what else was I supposed to show? I left my seat, got the dog to jump up into it, made him sit up and beg, told him to say bow wow. And then he'd said bow wow, of course. People were intrigued.
In Berlin before the war, when I was Daily Telegraph correspondent, there was a video telephone service opened between Berlin and Leipzig. I think it was on March 1st, 1936.
Hallo? Tag Helga. Na siehst du, da bin ich selbst. Na wunderbar.
Within months, and with the help of some of Philo Farnsworth's American cameras, the Germans televised the 1936 Olympics, although the audience was still tiny and largely restricted to viewing rooms in Berlin and Hamburg. One of the cameramen was a young man named Walter Bruch.
Und die Stelle, wo die Kamera war genau das Ziel da drüben vom 100-Meter-Lauf. Dort konnte man also übertragen, wie Jesse Owens damals seine Goldmedaille verdient hat. Und das war also ein herrlicher Platz und für mich ein unvergängliches Erlebnis. Ich bin kein Sportler und ich habe das alles durch den Sucher der Kamera gesehen und habe also sozusagen einen besseren Platz gehabt da unten als Hitler.